Ahoy, sojourners of the virtual skies. This is Benjamin Boyce, and I have been producing interviews for a year and a half now. And I had the complete and utter fortune to interview last night my literary hero or literary champion. I don't know if he'd lay down his life for me in a battle to the death, but if things proceed as I see them proceeding, that might not be necessary. This guy's name is Stephen Brust, and he's got about 30 novels under his belt. In this interview, we talk about fiction, we talk about his writing style, we talk about his influence on me. We also talk about Marxism. We talk about politics. We talk about things that we probably will both lose a lot of followers for talking about, but maybe not, because our followers are lenient enough to take delight when we get off script and wander into the weeds. I do want to add that by a completely random chance event, his favorite novel of mine, or my favorite novel of his, Agur, if you can see this, it was written in the mid-90s, and it just came out in audiobook form. And I highly recommend, if you read anything by Brust, it is this book. This is a wonderful, wonderful book. I can't fanboy hard enough, and I probably shouldn't anyways, so let's just get right to it. Here's Stephen Brust. Hey.
I love living in the future.
Well, wait, it's the future already? I'm not prepared. How's your evening going?
It's my morning.
Okay, how's your morning?
It's slowly waking up. This is bound to be interesting.
Okay, we're just going to watch the wheels begin to crank.
Mm-hmm.
Are you drinking clava?
I am, in fact, drinking coffee because I have yet to find a decent a clava recipe that works. I'm told there is one.
Huh.
Of the various ones people have come up with. There's one I'm assured actually does it, but I haven't. And some guy sent me all the things, and I just haven't gotten around to putting it together yet.
Okay.
Which makes me feel really bad because he obviously put a lot of work into it, but most of the recipes I've tried have the opposite effect.
The opposite of being good?
In particular, it's supposed to have the full flavor of coffee without the bitterness.
Okay.
And instead it intensifies the bitterness.
Oh, interesting.
I think because of the wood chips.
Okay. Well, what caused you to place clava in your fantasy world then?
Because I wanted something that tastes like coffee smells.
Oh, okay.
It's my world. I wanted a good coffee-like drink and no mosquitoes.
So
that was the foundation of the world right there. Someplace I want to live. Good coffee, no mosquitoes.
Okay. You know what? Looking back on my memory of your books, I don't think I've interacted with one mosquito.
See? No mosquitoes.
Huh, that's weird. But I guess so all the evil in the world has to be offloaded onto humanoids then, I guess.
Pretty much, yeah.
Probably, yeah.
Hate mosquitoes.
Wait, but is that from your Minnesota upbringing? Is that what gives you this?
It's the state bird.
State swarm, maybe?
Yeah. Although, frankly, they don't bother me so much anymore because they hate nicotine, and okay. I'm down to very little blood in my nicotine system now.
Wow. Okay. How do you manage that? Is there like a clava concoction of nicotine that just completely fills you up?
I smoke a lot.
Okay. You're not e-cigs.
Sometimes
okay.
e-cigs. When I'm trapped somewhere I can't use tobacco, then I will sometimes use an e-cig.
You know what? I don't want to fanboy on you because I promised myself not to do that. But I was sitting on my deck yesterday. I was smoking a cigarette. I'm like, I wonder if Stephen Brust would approve of me smoking cigarettes or not. That was an open question. So now I guess you have no choice but to approve.
Pretty much. It's Brust, by the way.
Brust. Thank you.
Yeah.
At least I pronounce clava correctly.
Right. Well, in terms of made up of the words in my books,
Brust.
My philosophy is if I'm going to make up funny words, I don't get to complain about how people say them.
Yeah, but your last name's not a made up word.
Right, right.
So,
Well, except insofar as all words are made up words, I guess.
it helped that there was an umlaut there, but apparently that got dropped somewhere along the line.
Well, how should I say this? The name is originally Germanic,
Mm.
means breast or chest.
Mm. Hmm.
And the German pronunciation is Brust.
Okay.
The American pronunciation is Brust, and the Hungarian pronunciation is Brust, where
Okay.
it is spelled Bruszt.
Mm.
I think in order to get that pronunciation, that would be but the U defaults in Hungarian. The U is a long U,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
it starts changing as you put various marks around it.
Yeah.
Umlaut, long umlaut, diacritical, all the fun little things they do to entertain us.
And did that Z get dropped when your family migrated to the Americas?
I have the impression it got dropped before that sometime, that while they were in Hungary, but I'm not 100% sure.
So, what percentage of your writing, roughly speaking, do you think derives from your ancestral heritage? I mean, the Broke Down Palace, I assume, is pretty deeply steeped in it because it has that
Oh
feeling
yeah.
of.
Oh yeah. I don't know that I could give it in terms of a percentage. It's
But is it there?
it's sort
Is
of
it something
it goes through everything. It goes
Yeah.
through everything because when in doubt, and I need something, that's what I grab for.
Huh.
Because in my formative teenage years, I read a lot of Hungarian folklore and Hungarian it's the thing when you're a super insecure kid, not that any of us would know about that.
Doing a whole series on that, actually.
One of the things I needed was a hook to hang my pride on.
Yeah.
You do when you're a kid. You say, I'm special because X.
Yes.
And that's what I grabbed onto.
Interesting. I've been doing a lot of investigation into the obsession with identity, especially in the teen and early 20s. And it seems like you grabbed onto your tradition. I kind of grabbed onto my tradition too. A lot of kids are grabbing onto newer things to pin their identity on, but it seems like just something that we have to do.
And I think that's perfectly reasonable and completely healthy until it becomes political, and then you're in deep shit.
Political or pathological, or is there a difference?
Oh, nice. Now you got me going. Now I may need more coffee to answer that.
Well, I have a beer
Well,
here.
I guess either.
Okay.
And
yeah.
They probably aren't the same.
Yeah. But why would you say that once an identity that I guess could be thought of as a scaffold for the self that the self is using while it builds itself, what is it about being politicized that gets somebody in trouble, do you think?
Because I think there are greater, more important, more significant, and more fundamental issues around which to organize than the cosmetic ones.
Okay. And how do we bridge that gap? I guess maybe getting biographical, looking back at your life, how did you bridge the gap from like the cosmetic, I'm dressing up as a Hungarian, even just intellectually, into like becoming more fuller and less surface oriented?
Okay, this is going to be tricky. You ready?
Yeah.
I grew up.
Okay. Does that involve kids? Was there a special recipe?
No, it's and you know, I wouldn't say it's a completed process because it never is.
Yeah, no, yeah.
But eventually you outgrow that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know, you suddenly there's more to who you are. The real answer is acquired skills. Anytime you're boy, I see this person doing that thing. I sure wish I could do that thing because that's cool. Oh, after all this work, now I can do that thing.
Yeah.
Then that takes the place of
Effantry.
Yeah.
Huh.
Or it ought to. We hope it does.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess it solves some things, but probably just leads you to other flaws or projects to work on in your
It
life.
certainly leads you to other projects, but I think it's overall a good thing. I mean, the real cure
Skill.
for lack of self-confidence is learning skills.
Yeah. To sink
Skills that
yourself into something that you
sink
own.
yourself in. Yeah, and say, "Hey, I learned to do that." And once you go, "Wow, I didn't know how to do that. Now I can,"
Hmm.
to this level of competence that at one time I thought was difficult or impossible,
Hmm.
then say, "Well, I can do that with other things, can't I? If I learned how to play the guitar to some level of competence, why can't I learn to write? It's just
Yeah.
a matter,
Exactly.
and so on."
Yeah. Once you look at the world as a series of masteries, then it's
Mhm.
less overwhelming. Even if it's impossible, it still remains as impossible.
Right, and it gives you something to answer back
Huh.
on those nights when, as my friend Elise once put it, you're listening to the walls do your autobiography. And
There's so many ways to read that.
it's not, it isn't going to completely solve everything, but at least it gives you something to say,
Yeah.
okay, you're right, I did all those terrible things and I am horrible because of XYZ,
Yeah.
but at least I can do this.
Yeah. I was speaking with Corinna, who I interviewed before. She's a trans woman in the East Coast, and she drove you to an event at some point in your life. I don't know when this was. And
Uh-huh.
she wanted me to ask you, what do you think the role of narrative is in young people's development? And just to kind of bring this back around to like, what is the value of the story?
Oh, well, now there's a nice, narrow, precise, easy question.
Yeah, I didn't know how you would respond to that one.
I'm going to respond to that by saying, give me a second, I'm going to get more coffee.
Okay.
All right. That is such a huge question. Let me take some pieces of it.
Okay.
It certainly can be useful on an individual level to tell yourself a story. At times when things are difficult, growth is needed, or just getting past pain.
Hmm.
Sometimes it can be really useful to build it on narrative. This is who I am. This is the story of my life. I mean, this is what's going on. It can also be unhealthy. It can be pathological.
Hmm.
The postmodernists certainly believe that narrative takes the place of truth, whereas I think that is only true if we let it, and it's a very bad
Hmm.
idea.
Okay.
Um,
Hmm. So does do you think that story should have a relationship to truth and not a replacement of truth? Then is there like a proper relationship between a narrative and truth? Does truth fill up the narrative, or does truth like become the eventual like hope that a narrative becomes? Or speaking metaphorically, of course.
yeah, and the answer is that I mean, as you're creating narrative, or to be precise, as you're writing stories, you are certainly hoping to discover what is true and
Yeah.
lay it before the reader. That's one of your goals. That is, in some sense, your highest goal.
Yeah.
Even if we never get there, we try.
Huh.
That's and that has certain very abstract
Yeah.
results, but also some very concrete ones. That's what's going on when you get to that writing point where your character says, "No, I won't do that."
Hmm.
What's happening there is the truth of the story
Okay.
is being infringed, and your story is letting you know that somewhere along the line
Huh. You
you
were
screwed
mistaken.
up, or the path you've laid out for yourself is not going to work. It violates the truth of the story.
Yeah.
um the search for truth, I'm not saying we can ever know truth with a
Yeah.
capital T. I'm saying the search for it
Yeah.
is
And
important, and it is real. I mean, there is, the human race has gotten to where we have been by getting closer and closer to understanding the world around us.
Yeah.
And art is, in a way, it's a part of that process. We capture it in images and in artifacts,
Yeah.
and symbolically and emotionally,
Yeah. Okay.
but it's still, no, this is something real. And that moment you get in the best work, we just lost Gene Wolfe. So it's a good time to mention he would do that. Those moments of, wow, it really is like that. That's going on around me, and I had not noticed.
Yeah. And so you mentioned the postmodernist view that the truth is just made up narrative or assemblage of
Yeah,
narrative, and it's a
yeah,
fantasy. But your wheelhouse in writing is called fantasy.
right.
So postmodernists want to strip truth away, but even fantasy, by claiming that it's not truth, is not letting go of the pursuit of truth. What's the relationship between fantasy and truth? Is it another way of getting to that? Is
It's
it
another. It's
lifting up
another.
certain restrictions to get into other things?
You've answered your own question. That's exactly what it is.
Hmm.
For example, certain kinds of fantasy do it. Let's take secondary world fantasy. We know what we mean by that, right?
Could you define that, please?
Um, Creating another world. This isn't taking
Okay.
place on Earth. This is taking place in a made-up land, in Middle Earth,
Yeah.
or Westeros, or you name it,
Dragera, yeah.
or Dragera. Yeah. And one of the things you can do with that is examine your own world in a way that you cannot from within it.
Hmm.
I walk around in my house, but I can't really see my house because I'm inside it. I have to go
Yeah.
across the street.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, secondary world fantasy, for example, allows you to do that. What we do with magic, it can be any number of things. In one, some of which I have been consciously doing at times in the Vlad novels,
Yeah.
is magic would be a stand-in for engineering.
Yeah.
In other words, it allows me to address how is it we use this accumulated scientific and engineering knowledge, particularly those of us who don't know how it works. We just get into our car and drive. We just hook up our computer and hit
Yeah.
Skype.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so how it is that we interact with that, I can play with that by calling it magic.
Okay. But you don't do the same thing with personalities or archetypes. Mentioning your Vlad novels, every novel in this series is named after a certain house in in the realm that you've created, and
Right.
each house has certain characteristics. And I could think of them now. I don't know if you'd agree with this or not, as kind of archetypes, or they're assemblages of a persona kind of thing. So it's not like the persona's not standing in for magic. There's no swapping out of that persona, or is there? Are you investigating a different character by using it as a theme?
That's cool. I'd never thought of it that way. A lot of what I'm doing on that is providing myself hooks and inspirations.
Okay, yeah.
My entire writing career is built on cheating.
Yeah,
I
I
ch-
know. I love
I
that about you. I love that so much.
I cheat happily and merrily and am in favor of it. And one of the ways I will cheat is, okay, if I've got a lot of it is, okay, what happens next, or what's the next scene, or what's the next word, and there's 1,000 different ways.
To orient
To,
yourself.
yeah, and building it based on a house is one of those, and one of, for me, the most useful. I can just go, well, let's see. I'm writing about
Yeah.
House of
Okay.
the Tsar.
Yeah.
So if I don't know what happens, he's going to have to do something Zer-like.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, so,
So
but
are you saying that you're not really conscious of like the investigation that causes you to do, because that's what you end up
oh no,
refocusing your on? Do you get more understanding of what these characters are, these houses?
absolutely, yeah, I do that, and that's part of the fun for me. But that's also part of the same cheat, because not just okay, he's got to do something Sir like, but also again stuck, not sure what happens next. I can go, well, what does it mean to be
Hmm.
this kind of person? And
Yeah.
how can I turn that into dialogue and action
Huh.
and in order to investigate it? And you try like hell to keep yourself honest, because
Yeah.
when you don't, at least to me, it really shows.
Hmm.
It shows in a flawed work, in a plot where that goes, wait, why did he do that?
Are you able to see that, or does it take years for you to see that? See those flaws, see those mistakes? Or are you unable to finish something unless you confront that mistake and
There are
somehow
a
grapple?
number of mistakes and problems and errors that I don't see for years.
Yeah.
That one I seem to have a pretty good handle on just
Hmm.
from feel.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah. Okay.
if it feels wrong as I'm doing it, I have learned to pay attention to that.
Okay. Huh. Okay. But,
And
so some things can be resolved by feeling, but something like a technical detail or a plot arc or
a place where I
something like
use
that.
too many words, or worst
Oh.
of all, a place where I used the almost right word instead of the right word.
Ouch.
And I come back to that 20 years later and go, why did they let me get away with that? Also, someone please shoot me.
Oh
Um,
no.
I would say, I don't know if this is true of every writer. Maybe it is, but at least for me, 95% of my um
Hmm.
errors, of the things I regret, the things I didn't get quite right, are nothing more than laziness.
Huh.
Nothing more than pure, damn it, I needed to look at that more closely. I needed
Okay.
to put more time into that. And
Okay.
and I try very hard not to do that. And yet I still, when reading something from 20 years ago, go,
Yeah.
eh, eh.
Can I ask you a specific question? Your favorite novel, my favorite novel of yours, yeah, I said that right, is Agyar, and I'm probably mispronouncing that.
Oh, thank you very much. I am really, that's one of the few that I just look at and go, yeah, God damn it, I nailed that one.
Uh, would you mind talking about where you were when you wrote that and what that was like to write? Because it
Uh,
just seems like a blessed novel. It's just perfect.
that's how it seems to me too, which is a horrible thing to say about my own work. But that one was magical. It was amazing. I just wrote up on my blog the story of its first
Oh,
inspiration. Um, I can tell it again if you'd like. I got no problem telling this story.
okay. I would love to hear it.
It's about Gene Wolfe, and that's what caused me to rewrite it. I got on this Gene Wolfe kick, as does everyone who discovers him, pretty much,
Hmm.
um, and and is willing to read on his terms, which I
Okay.
had to learn to do.
Hmm.
Um, and as when I was and I'm going through all his works, and I got to Peace, and I read Peace, and I put it down and went, well, that's interesting. A guy wanders around his house. That's not what's going on here. I'm missing something. So I called Neil Gaiman, which is what you do when you can't understand Gene Wolfe. And this was, of course, years ago when you could just, call Neil Gaiman.
Yeah.
Um, and I said, Neil, help me. What's going on? And he goes, oh, right, okay. You know that tree that falls over on page 1? Well, halfway through the book, he plants it. He's a ghost.
Okay.
Oh. And, and he talks about, you know, he commits various murders during the book and never quite tells you he does. He gives you the information to put it together
Yeah.
and and stuff. So I reread it and I was like, wow. And sometime later, and I was having a discussion with my brother-in-law about Dickens and some of the way he got some of the effects, and the
What do you
symbolism at
mean
the
by
end.
effects? Like within the reader or in the?
within the work. Some of
Okay.
the way he did things, and it popped into my head. It would
Okay.
be really cool if I were to write a vampire book to have at some point when we meet the person who will take down the hero, there are shadows of wooden stakes on
Hmm.
the ceiling,
Okay.
which, by the way, happens the first time he meets Susan.
Okay.
I don't call them that, but you know. And then I
Okay.
immediately went, peace. Wow, I could do a vampire novel and never tell people it
Yeah.
was a vampire novel, just be this evil guy wandering around doing evil things. So
Yeah.
I just thought that was the coolest idea ever. I ran off, says I said to my brother-in-law, I gotta go now, and dashed up to my study and just pounded out the first chapter.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, do I tell people I'm showing it to this is going to be a vampire novel, or do I just let see it, and I showed it to my writers group, and they said, oh, you're writing a vampire novel.
Okay. Yeah.
And I showed it to my editor, and she said, oh, you're writing a vampire novel. And I showed it to my agent and said, oh, you're writing a vampire. Yeah, I'm writing a fucking vampire novel. Shut up. This is how I learned I am not Gene Wolfe. I did
Ah.
once get to tell that story on a panel when Gene was in the audience, and he laughed a great deal.
Oh, good. Yeah.
But
You
anyway, it was an amazing transcendental experience.
hmm.
Inspiration, which we can define as the creative unity of the conscious and the unconscious,
I would agree with that.
is something that, in my experience, happens in short bursts, occasionally longer ones. The work is not inherently either better or worse.
Okay.
It's simply more fun in
Yeah.
moments of inspiration. It
Yeah.
flows and it's a delight and it's a joy. That entire book was one 6-week period of
Yeah.
inspiration. I don't remember anything
Yeah.
except sitting at the computer reading it as it came off my fingers.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was
Okay.
so cool.
Yeah.
Of
Man.
course, I had a fair bit of revision and
Yeah.
same as anything else. But wow, that was a fun book. It just came out on audio, by the way.
Oh, did it? I was
Yes,
wondering about that. Who
I, um,
reads
I,
it?
I do.
Oh,
Except
really?
except the my friend Kaylin Rashke reads the prologue and the epilogue, and then I do the
Okay.
rest.
Oh, excellent. Perfect. Wonderful. Oh, I'm so happy to hear that. What season was it when you wrote it? What part of the year were those 6 weeks? If you...
Wow, that's a wonderful question, and I don't remember. I'd have to figure it out. Why? What made you ask that?
I
That's
just
a
I
very
had
interesting question.
I just had a feeling of I'm rereading it right now. I've read it several times. I can't even recall how many times I've read it, but like this time going through it, I just had a feeling of your connection to the environment, and I just wondered
Ah,
because it's set in the winter, but there was something
okay,
autumnal about it.
autumnal. Yeah,
Autumnal.
that stuff. Okay, I did a lot of fun things just that I enjoyed and no one would pick up on just because I loved them. One of the things is, okay, the powers and limitations. My phone has decided it wants to talk to me.
Oh yeah,
Um,
Siri does that. Yeah,
the
the powers and limitations.
the powers and limitations of the vampire are straight out of Dracula, which
Hmm.
remains my favorite vampire novel.
Okay.
Um, the timeline of the book is exactly the corresponding timeline. It's the rest of the year from Dracula.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Dracula takes place from I think May around to September, if memory serves, and this is the rest of the year.
Okay, this is the god of the wanting year then to
Yeah,
Dracula's waxing year.
and
Huh.
and also there were things like I kept really close track of what the moon, where the phase of the moon was, and Jack gets different and changes, and what he writes about and how much he wants to write changes with the
Huh.
waxing and waning moon. So stuff like that, and little
Yeah.
things that nobody is going to specifically notice, but they made the work more real to me,
Yeah.
and that translated a little bit.
Yeah, so many tricks that the writer needs to do are just to get the writer to do what he needs the reader to do, which is to read the
Exactly.
book.
Exactly. There's a lot of, I have a friend, Jim McDonald, who gave this, James D. McDonald, gave a wonderful lecture on writing. And one of the examples he used was he built this really elaborate, beautiful dollhouse.
Hmm.
And he talks about constructing it, planning it, building it. One of the things is there is a completely enclosed room. And Jim said, there's a guy in there that I put who's got a saw and he's working at a workshop building this house.
Okay.
And you can't see him.
Yeah.
But I know he's there. And the fact that I know he's there informs how I built the house.
Yeah.
And that's a perfect example.
I don't want to cast shade on J.J. Abrams because he might one day end up producing an HBO series based on your novels, but he's got a story about like this magic box or this present that he has that he refuses to open. And a lot of his movies have that box in it where there's that lacune, and I'm probably mispronouncing it. And I wanted to ask you about this. There's always a gap in your novels. There's always a gap in J.J. Abrams, like the movies that he has people write for him and that he produces. But there's something different about the gap that you provide. There's something in the gap. I always know that there's something in the gap, whereas I'm never sure if there's actually any gap in there. Do you know what I'm saying? Like there's that mystery element to J.J. Abrams' work, but like you're always like there's not. I'm always kind of disappointed where I can feel there's something in yours.
I think I do know what you mean, and that's one of the interesting things when you've been in this for as long as I have, because I will come up with a thing, a throwaway, and if you will, a box, and I'll know exactly what's in that box and why it's there. And 30 years later, I will have forgotten, but I still have the box. All I know is that at one time I knew why that was like that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's that goes back to something that you brought up about Gene Wolfe, and you said that you said something along the lines of reading on his terms. Like the reader has to read on his terms.
Yeah.
And one of the problems that I struggled with in my writing and that I've seen other young writers struggle with is that there's a difference between doing it the right way and doing it the wrong way. And doing it the wrong way would be to expect the reader to bow to your will in a weird way. Like you are able to please the reader and give them enough to get in the story, even though you withhold so much.
Thank you.
You're really good at withholding.
That's kind of the goal. I mean that's what I shoot for.
And how do you walk that line? How do you give them enough and respect their attention, but still demand that they play your game?
That may be the key question to the whole thing.
Yeah, maybe that's
and I've been working on. I was teaching for a while, and the centerpiece of my lecture was about exactly that. And the way you do that, I mean, I can state it in a single sentence how you do it, but that just asks the more difficult question. You do it by getting into the reader's head.
Okay.
By going, if I'm the reader, here's where I'm at right now. That gives you, now the trick is how to do that, and that's where it gets complicated.
Yeah.
But if you can do that, if you can be where the reader is, that's where cliches, instead of being obnoxious and annoying, suddenly become your friend. Yeah. Because you can start with the cliche and you know where the reader's head is, and then you twist it.
Yeah.
And you say, okay, this is a sophisticated reader. He's seen all these movies. He's read all these books. There's all this stuff going on. The reader knows when X, Y happens, we're setting up for Z.
Yeah.
So I can do something different.
Z2.
Or I can just go ahead and do that, depending on how it feels at the, what I think, I think it should work. But the control of the reader head, of directing where the reader is thinking, requires knowing what saying, if I were reading this book at this moment, here is where I would be. Here is what I would be expecting.
Okay.
This is what I would be feeling.
Yeah.
And if you can be aware of that, it gives you tremendous power, which we use for good or evil, and the choice is yours.
Yeah, well, unless you're a critic, then you can do whatever you want with the corpse that you're exhuming. There's I'm sorry, you're blowing my mind right now. So I had all these different questions, but I'm just thinking in so many different
You're very good at this. You're getting stuff out of me that has not generally been gotten out of me. Nice job.
Well, because it's just like I don't have any sense of the reader, but I do have a sense of where my interviewee is. I don't,
okay.
I can't. When I'm alone with the page, I don't understand that. But when I'm talking to somebody, that's when it finally clicks to me.
Sense. That means you're doing what you should be.
Yeah. So, oh yeah, I remember the question. So your first book, was it a Vlad novel?
Yes.
Okay.
It was Jarhead, or however you pronounce that. I don't remember.
And if I recall correctly, your wife at the time told you just to write a book, or just like gave you permission to take some time off to write a book.
Yeah,
I remember.
I'd gotten laid off from a programming job.
From a programming job.
And she said, "Okay, well, let's collect unemployment for 6 months, write a book."
Okay.
And I said, "Okay."
Yeah. How the fuck did you pull that off? Like, how old were you? I don't understand how you did that.
Let me see. I would have been 25, 24, wow. 25.
And how did you know how to do that? I don't understand how you did that, because I'm 42. I still can't do what you did when you were 25.
Well, I can't do what you do. I'd been writing. I mean, writing was like an itch to me that I would come up approximately twice a year and would last 2 weeks, where I've got to write. I have to get story down. And then it would go away. and I'd feel better. And it just gradually got to be more often and for longer duration, until now it's kind of constant.
Yeah,
it's just, I want to get those words down, because it doesn't feel right if I don't.
Yeah, okay. I understand that feeling. And I don't want to ask about writer's block, but it seems like you don't have that, or it's something else.
I haven't yet, at least. I haven't
really?
Yet. I have not, I'm not going to say it would never happen. I mean, I've gotten stuck, certainly.
Yeah, okay. That's different when you get stuck.
As I understand it, writer's block is a different thing than just not knowing what happens next. And, and so far, I have managed to avoid it.
So earlier on in our conversation, you said that a story will tell you when you're off, and you'll feel the mistake happening, and you'll need to correct it.
Certain kinds of mistakes, yeah.
Certain kinds. You've been writing this Vlad stuff for what, 30? I don't know the exact date, but it was 80 something, right? Started.
I wrote it in 1980, sold it in 81, came out in 83.
80. So this is almost 40 years old. This series that you've been doing. So working on these individual novels is one thing. Another thing, I don't know if you're free to talk about this. How does that translate into I'm stuck with the world? It's one thing to be stuck with the story, but do you ever get stuck with the world, or did you?
It never feels like I'm stuck with it. It feels like it keeps opening up in front of me. Okay. Like, oh, here's a piece I haven't examined. This would be fun. I mean, my system for, people ask why I write the books out of order and what my plan is, and there isn't one. The plan is nothing more than, I know what would be a fun story. I'm going to tell this one. Now, I'm now getting toward the end, and therefore now for the first time, and not with the one I'm on now, but after this one, I'm working on Salmeth. After this, I'll have 3 to go. And that may start to feel a bit restrictive at that point. Okay. Like, I've got to write one of these. And I don't know how I'll deal with that. I won't until I get there.
So you haven't been working on compulsion. You've been working on inspiration.
I wouldn't even call it necessarily
Well,
inspiration.
okay, yeah,
Maybe that's pretty close, something like that. But just
exploration.
yeah,
You're not
is
doing
like
things because you have to.
right, and of course thematically they often carry over into each other.
Yeah.
Now the themes are not very obvious, and I think any reader can cheerfully ignore them.
Yeah.
They're there to
Yeah.
keep me going, not for the reader, but there are certain things as part of that thing of how do I figure out what happens next? How do I keep going? In addition to the houses, there's also usually a theme of some kind I'm looking at, a question I'm trying to answer or explore.
Yeah.
And sometimes this will carry forward from one book to the next.
Yeah, the thing that of your work that has influenced me so much is the number of different tricks you use. And you call them cheats, but they're just layers. Like you'll have a house, then you'll have like a question, like you're saying, then you'll have like some sort of emotional arc, you'll have the actual plot, but then there's always like a trick that you'll use with how you break up the chapters or like your heading and stuff.
But that's fun. Isn't that fun?
It's all those different things.
Yeah, it's that, you write the book you wish someone else had written because it's what you want to read, right? I mean, that's what I hope we're doing.
Okay,
hang on, I got to get more coffee.
Yeah. Oh, and I had 2 questions then. Okay.
All right, sorry about that. I had to. I'm starting to wake up. I'm starting to wake up now. Did I say anything stupid?
Did I?
I don't think so.
The best part about speaking with the writer is you correct me in real time, so I don't have to deal with all the comments correcting me afterwards.
There was somebody, this is years and years ago, and I didn't do it, and I'm glad I didn't do it, but I so wanted to call in. It was some radio web, I think it was a webcast, I don't remember, but it was so long ago, talking about my work and various others, and it was really nice, and they were very kind, except they took me to task for ripping off Zelazny's Fracker. Did you read the second Amber books? Second Amber series?
I read the first one. I can't remember if I read the second.
Starts with Trumps of Doom. And in it, our main character has this sort of semi-living thing that he keeps around his wrist.
Yeah.
And they accused me of ripping that off, and I wanted to go, dude, look at the copyright dates.
Oh.
It's the only time I've ever had a real urge to call up somebody and say, hey, no what? That's not right. And the rest of the time you go, okay, if you hated it, you hated it,
Well, I guess
wrong, you liked it.
Okay, well, did you want to correct them because they were factually wrong, or because you realized at that moment that you were lower in the pecking order from Zelazny?
Oh, I've always been lower. I mean, he's my hero. Okay, he is my hero. Yeah, it's because it was a combination of factually correct and being accused of the sort. I stole a lot from Zelazny, but not that kind of thing.
Oh, okay.
I mean, you could pretty much summarize the Vlad books as taking the aesthetic of a Zelazny novel in the world of a Fritz Leiber novel with the tropes of a Moorcock novel and the voice of a Raymond Chandler novel.
Yeah.
And you mash those together, there's my work. There's not, that's it.
Yeah. But there's a proper way to steal. Like there's that Picasso or Abraham Lincoln quote about great artists thieving in the light. But there's a proper way to steal.
Yes. Yes.
That at once uplifts your the person that taught you what to do, and also maintains your self-respect.
Yeah, I'd go along with that.
And how do you know what to do? I guess it's just another feeling thing. It's an honor thing.
It's another feeling thing. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And I love taking things I'm geeked on and winking at them, which is another thing than stealing. I don't know if you've ever seen Burn Notice, but one of the Vlad books where where I just copped the opening of Burn Notice and just stuck it in as my prologue, as close to word for word as I could.
Huh.
And sometimes smaller things, a wink at Monty Python, and
Yeah.
either you catch it or you don't, and if you do, hee hee, and let's move on.
Yeah, but it's not central. Like in some of your earlier
Right.
novels, you have this odd acronym after your name, Joyce Fellowship,
PJF,
PJF.
Pre-Joycean Fellowship.
So you're like the most Joycean anti-Joycean out there because you're always referencing, but it's not core to the novel. Is that fair to say? That you're
I
doing the
it's
same things that he does, but you're doing something else while you're doing that.
That's an interesting way to look at it. I mean, the theory, the philosophy behind the Pre-Joycean Fellowship is obviously loosely based on the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood.
Oh, okay.
And the Pre-Raphaelites did not think there was anything wrong with Raphael. They loved Raphael. They just thought that his influence had gone in the
Yeah.
wrong direction. And
Okay.
it's the same thing with the way we felt about Joyce. Nothing wrong with Joyce.
Yeah.
It's people who picked up the wrong things from him, if you will. The best summary of the Joycean Fellowship came from Tappan King. Used to edit the Twilight Zone magazine, has done pretty much everything in publishing. And his summary was, we exist to make fun of the excesses of modern literature while simultaneously mining it for everything of value.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Exactly.
And to me, that's perfect. That's the goal. Yes.
Yeah. In order to be against something in a fruitful manner, you take everything that it possibly could give rise to and push it to the extreme while just shitting, pardon me, all over everything that was wrong with it.
Yeah. The one dialectically, one would say you negate it.
Yeah, but there's a proper way to negate, just like there's a
Well, I
proper
mean,
way to steal.
that's what I mean is in the dialect, negating it in the dialectical sense, not by ignoring it, but by assimilating it
Okay.
and then going beyond.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay, so we're kind of in political territory. Well, maybe we are, maybe we're not, but I want to take it there. And I had a question to you from something you said earlier about knowing where the reader is while you're writing. And like
Right.
positioning a reader. Maybe the reader's just you, but you have that superposition of the reader, the consumer, the person who's going along, who's not doing the work, but is reassembling the work into a field of imaginative reality or whatever.
That's
There's
a
this
nice way to
thing.
put it, really. I like that.
Well,
Anyway,
yeah, thank you. But there are these things called sensitivity readers now in the publishing industry. I don't know if you know about them or
yeah, I
not,
do.
but they are now going through, and they're another superposition that it seems could go in a totally wrong way. I disagree with them on a lot of levels, but insofar as they disrupt the creative process, they they could actually block one off from actually forwarding a discussion that's really important. What do you think about the sensitivity reader? Is it that big of a deal, or is it setting a precedent that we need to be really wary of?
You are asking me to comment on something about which I might get
Yeah.
limitless flack.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
let me charge. Let me dive in. Both. I think we do need to be wary of it for exactly the reason you say, but I also think it can be useful. I mean, I did that. I have a buddy in Good Guys. Has an African American protagonist, and I had a friend that said, "You know something? I might be missing some crap here. Let me ship it over to him." And get
Okay.
his comments. And
Okay.
it wasn't a big thing of, I've got a sensitivity reader, but I
Yeah.
was asking a buddy who was more knowledgeable than me on this area
Yeah.
to look it over and see what he thought. And he gave me some really interesting, very useful suggestions. And that I was, able to put in a word here and a word there and just
Okay.
sort of, tweak.
Yeah.
And I found it very useful. On the other hand, I'm not turning it into a major thing. I am a little leery of.
Yeah. Well, I can see in the opening to Agia, or like the acknowledgments, you list somebody who helped you with medical terminology. And it seems like if there's a cultural resource that you can incorporate authentically, if that's what the story demands, then I can see the use for it and all that respect for these
Exactly.
culture.
Exactly.
But when it becomes a policing action, and how do we walk that line between respect and being policed?
I think what you're talking about is a very real thing. And my answer is I'm simply going to write the next book I'm
Mm,
going to write.
yeah.
And I really want to keep the hell out of how other people approach their work.
Hmm.
If there are people who are uncomfortable writing something without going through a certain process,
Yeah.
I get to sit there in the back of my head and go, is that hurting your work? I don't know.
Hmm.
But I can't really know that either. And it's kind of not my place.
Yeah.
For me, I'm just going to keep writing the next book I feel like writing. And when I reach one of those things with, as you say, a cultural thing or medical terminology where I go, I need some help with this, I'm going to get the help.
Yeah.
Did that
It,
answer your question, or did I
well,
dodge it neatly?
no, I probably just shouldn't go down this, but the other precedent isn't just what the publishers are doing, but with regards to some happenings within the young adult sphere, there's like this mob mentality that wants to shape the writing craft in its own image and make sure that everybody goes through a process of being vetted by the mob. And I'm not necessarily we can maybe we can abstract the political aspect, the particular political aspect, but that precedent of a mob telling a writer or an artist what to do and the artist going around and apologizing and then shifting the
It's extremely dangerous. You're right. I don't believe it has so far had much effect on me, which
yeah.
limits how much right I have to object
Okay.
to it. But
Yeah. All right.
and also I don't keep up with the field as well as I should to have a really good opinion about that.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Yeah.
But,
But if that's affecting
okay,
future writers,
let me
people
put
who
it
would
to you
take up
this
your
way.
mantle.
Let me put it to you this way. Everyone who reads a book has a right to critique that book. The author, if the author should happen to come across that work of criticism,
Mm-hmm.
the writer then has the right to take as little or as much of that to heart
Mm-hmm.
as seems appropriate. Where I draw the line is because the subject matter of your criticism is XYZ, that gives you
Authority.
extra.
Yeah.
That means you, the writer, have to listen to me.
Yeah.
And no, I won't go there.
Okay.
I will decide what I will listen to and what I will pay attention to.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So let's get away from current politics and let's get into Marxism.
How is that not current politics?
Because every once in a while you say that you're a Marxist. At least that's what I've seen.
That's correct.
But and maybe this is a misreading of Marxism. And allow me a little bit of wiggle room, and please correct me if I go astray. But if Marxism, in a certain respect, wants to redistribute resources, depending on needs, right, and redistributing resources based on needs. Does that not translate, or has it not already always translated into the redistribution of psychic needs, like of who gets to say what, and the whole beyond the capital level, beyond the materialistic level of shuffling around resources? There's also the psychic capital that is always shuffled around, of what you can say, what you can't say, and who's the most oppressed group, and who we need to be careful around, and who needs extra respect.
I think looking at that, concentrating on who is the most oppressed group or who gets this, and I think it's incredibly unhealthy. It has certainly nothing to do with Marxism.
Okay.
The Marxism is a theory of knowledge. It's a method for understanding the world.
Okay.
Based on social classes, that is relation to production and distribution, and how society works, and making a certain amount of understanding of where it's headed.
It seems like it goes from distribution of production to redistribution. Do you kind of see what I'm trying to say? Like, it always has a cultural impact.
I almost see what you're trying to say, but to me, a cultural impact. I mean, if we might be talking completely different at cross purposes here, but but the intellectual, the ideological, the cultural, to me, always follows from the material.
Okay.
So, I mean, we're not seeing a redistribution of wealth. We're not at this point. We're seeing wealth concentration. We're seeing an increase in especially the upper 0.1% of the population, but even the upper 10%, and ideologies that go with that.
Ideologies of that. I just want to say selfishness or blindness to the suffering of others.
Yeah, go with being in that in sort of the upper 10% economic bracket. Yeah. That has nothing to do with Marxism, except insofar as Marxism is fighting those ideologies.
Okay, so I wonder if there's a way to base the understanding that other people have it worse and that I can help them on some sort of like internal prompt rather than an external mandate. Like that's where we're way off course right now, but
sure, but that's all right. The part that dings me on what you just said is that solidarity, which is really what we're talking about.
Okay. Human solidarity across the board.
At least class solidarity.
So the different classes are not
eventually human solidarity, but as someone who is committed to the cause of the working class, creating solidarity is not based on, and this is one of the places where I so strongly disagree with so many people on my social media feeds. It's not based on, well, I'm fine, or however you put it, but I can help these other people. Okay. It's my needs for me to advance require solidarity with others.
Okay. Yeah.
Take it as let's take one of the clear ones that comes up and is really nasty, and I'm probably, if this goes out, I'm going to lose about 2,000 Twitter followers. So let's
you have plenty to burn, Stephen.
That's about a third. Anyway, whatever. Let's take, for example, Black Lives Matter, or the racist attacks by police in various ways. To me, the reason that is important, that not necessarily that particular movement, but the fact that there are racist attacks, there are murders that are fundamentally class-based, is not because, I'm in this, I'm fine, I have nothing to worry about, but I'm going to help these other people. It's because, no, that gun's going to be pointing at me. And if we just let this continue, it's the oppression will only spread. We have to get together and fight. Not because I'm this great noble person who's willing to sacrifice myself for others,
Yeah.
but because it's in my interest not to
Hmm.
have cops shooting people down whenever
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
like it.
Yeah.
Okay, and that to me is a key difference. Um,
How do you anchor that in? It seems like you're trying to articulate a mixture of selfishness and virtue that's realistic, like a realistic merger of those two. That
that's a good way to put it. Yeah,
and in a sense that there's strains of Adam Smith, like where if I help those around me, they help me. So I build capital by allowing capital to be generated around me. Like it's there's a selfish principle that you can never get away from, and insofar as you try to hide that, it gets stronger and stronger and comes back in nastier and nastier ways. If you don't like just kind of reckon, my self-interest is paramount to me, but that doesn't mean that my self-interest ends with me. It actually extends throughout my
that
community.
that's a good way to put it. And to me, of course, as a Marxist, that's fundamentally based on class. That is
Okay.
fundamentally class in the sense of those who
Hmm.
live by selling their labor power, by their ability to work.
Okay. Yeah.
Is that and yeah, I would
Hmm.
say it is exactly the case that self-interest requires class unity.
Uh, and so okay. Okay, apologize again for getting into this world, but to divide human beings into those who sell their labor and then into this other group that sell others' labor, it starts that first step of creating unsolidarity between groups, and that agitates that any step, it seems to me, any step of dividing people into even into classes further exacerbates those divisions.
The classes exist in reality. And denying that they exist just gives us a warped view of reality. We need to start
Okay.
with what actually is. And what actually is in order to live, you have to sell something.
Yeah.
You have to sell the product of your labor,
Yeah.
you have to sell your labor,
Yeah.
or you have to sell the product of someone else's labor.
Okay.
And that distinction,
Okay.
those who exist because they own property that
Okay.
others have to work at, have fundamentally different interests at this time
Okay.
than who those who have to sell their labor power.
Okay.
And that's reality. And
Hmm.
trying to say, well, I think everybody should get together
Yeah.
regardless of class is simply to ignore what's really going on.
Hmm.
And we can't change things. The first step of changing things is the fight to actually understand them.
Yeah. Oh, that's a brilliant quote. Could you tweet that out at some point?
I think I have several
Okay.
times,
Okay.
but
Maybe I'll retweet
you're
that.
welcome to, you know. And
Hmm.
and that isn't easy. That's a constant struggle.
Yeah. Well, human beings are chased by their own ignorance. Like no matter where we are, like that's the one monster that's always at the gate. Like we're always forgetting things. So we're always so myopic. So the
Yeah, well,
project of spreading understanding is tremendous and
which is
huge.
why when you come across utter reactionaries, one thing that they always have in common is disdain for history.
What do you mean by reactionary? I've seen
Uh,
that word used a bunch of different ways now.
I mean in the old traditional sense of extreme right wing.
Okay, a reaction
So,
to the different, reaction to the progressive
it's
or
the
the
term
progress.
reactionary. If you check it up in like an American Heritage Dictionary, the OED, refers to someone who wants to bring
Hmm.
If we look at the entire course of human history as a very gradual,
Yeah.
slow fight toward more equality, a
Hmm.
reactionary wants less equality,
Ah.
wants to take us backward
Okay. Okay.
in the
Where?
old traditional use of reactionary.
Okay. Okay.
And one of the things that distinguishes them is they don't want to know history, and if they do, they're going to warp it pretty badly.
Hmm. Hmm. And so the tug of war between the far reactionary, let's say right, and the far utopian left is how would you define that, or would you even accept that kind of that
No,
distinction?
I don't
No.
think I don't think I'd call it utopian. I think it's a matter of a fight for equality,
Okay. Okay.
political, social, and economic equality,
Okay.
and I just cannot see that as utopian. I you know,
Okay.
to me it's
Hmm.
how long have human beings existed? I mean, you can set the beginning point any of a number of places, but what do you want to say? 50,000 years, 100,000 years? We're infants. We're
Yeah.
babies.
Yeah.
We haven't even stopped fighting with ourselves yet.
Or pleasuring ourselves if we want to go there.
We to get to a point where we have actual equality among human beings
Yeah.
is just the launching pad for human culture. That's
Okay.
when we start growing. And the birth pangs of getting there are not pleasant,
Yeah. Okay.
but I don't see it as at all utopian.
You wrote a tweet a couple weeks ago, maybe a month ago, that along the lines of you wanted every person who has the creative urge to be able to indulge that creative urge and
Yes,
create whatever they wanted to.
yes, yes.
And I was trying to think of the limit of that, and I thought, well, that doesn't mean that everybody's required to read what everybody else writes, right?
No,
You
of
can't.
course not.
You can demand the ability to produce all you want, but you cannot demand the I guess the privilege of being consumed all you
Right,
want, of being
exactly right.
respected. So
Yes,
and I saw that people kind of flip those two, especially in the movements that I've been studying, is that they demand a certain sort of respect, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I have to respect your ideas. I'll give you a modicum of respect as a person that wants to create, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to respect the quality of your creation.
right. As you know, interestingly, one of the words that I might use with a curl of my lip in talking about someone is dilettante,
Okay.
and particularly as an artist. Is this person isn't serious about creating, this person is
Huh.
just, and yet simultaneously, I would love a society in which we could all be more dilettantes, in
Yeah.
which we could all. I don't want to commit
Yeah.
myself to this art. I want to dabble. I want to pick up a guitar and play a little bit, and
Okay.
and not have to become a master of it in order to
Mm-hmm.
feel worthwhile.
Hmm.
So it's in this society as it exists, dilettante is kind of a curse word. But I would love a society in which it wasn't.
Where we could afford to be dilettantes.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
This wraps up to where we really first started about orienting yourself towards maturity and how value is found in a skill. And maybe that's something I picked up with you, but that or something back in my Protestant heritage. But that's like my core belief is that skill is what makes life meaningful. Like meaning doesn't exist outside of being able to manipulate something to the highest possible degree that you can.
Yeah,
And
I'm comfortable with that.
and even in a society with loads and loads of free time, I think people will get into huge amounts of trouble if they don't realize that meaning's found in creating the best that you can create. And I think that a lot of like the dust ups on social media perhaps come down to us misusing the free time that we're being given. And we're not really exploiting our own labor, by which I mean really pursuing like the highest that we can, and that's the tension between being able to be a dilettante, but at the same time, do we really want that? We want a society of masters? Don't we want a bunch of Caravaggio's around?
We want both, and I don't think, I really don't think they're mutually exclusive. If people, I mean, I don't remember the quote. There's a great quote, and I wish I don't remember it. And I don't remember who said it, so I'm feeling really stupid. It might have been Stephen Hawking's, but it's something to the effect of, "I am less interested in the weight of Einstein's brain
Huh.
than
Yeah.
I am in all of the people who could have matched him or been,
Hmm.
as influential, as brilliant, and as powerful, except they're working in sugar plantations."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
I
a
mean,
really good point. Yeah.
that's I'm misquoting it badly, but that's a sort of summary. But that's the point: is let's create a society where if somebody wants to, somebody isn't prevented from achieving his or her full potential
Hmm. Hmm.
by poverty.
Yeah.
Or by external, by having to work a stupid 40-hour week at a grinding, horrible job.
Yeah, yeah. But at the same time, okay, I totally agree with that, and I want to push back a little bit insofar as I can see that without the need to create something of value for others, so much potential will be wasted without that writing prompt, without that urgency that life gives us. And I'm not talking about like maintaining. I'm not thinking of a reactionary let's keep people, the poor. I'm not saying that, but without some sort of need to produce, that prompt to survive, it seems like that drives the very essential innovations.
That's
and and
that
and and
that's
and and one of the problems with one of the critiques of socialism is that it gets people addicted to not really needing to drive themselves because they'll get a check no matter what, right? And I'm not saying that in themselves. So
Yeah, and that sure doesn't match my experience either of myself, because I
huh.
mean, when I am feeling financially crunched, that hurts my work. I slow down, I
Okay.
get nervous, I get
Okay.
scared. When
Yeah.
I am feeling like, oh, I'm just,
Hmm.
I'm at a smooth sailing point, I can do my best work. But not only that, I mean, this notion of, you must know engineers.
Yeah. A few.
Do you think if they'd stop being engineers if they didn't have to make a living? These are people who love creating,
Yeah.
fixing, building, doing.
Yeah.
Scientists.
Okay.
Scientists explore because they have a need to
Yeah.
understand. They aren't doing it for a paycheck for the most part. I mean, some of them are. Doctors. Most doctors did
Hmm.
not become doctors to get rich. The ones who did
Yeah.
are, for the most part, plastic surgeons.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, again, not everyone is the same, but overall, the people who have contributed most to society weren't doing it for a paycheck. They were doing it because they had that drive to do that thing.
Yeah. And so what you are wanting to establish is a society in which the drag of simply surviving is not getting in the way of that which somebody is prompted to do by an internal need, rather than just the need to not
Yes,
starve.
but there is one other factor that I feel like if I don't mention, I'm left out something huge. Even with that, and that how good I think that would be, and with an end to the oppression so many people live with,
Mm-hmm.
and the poverty, even all that, I don't think would push me over into favoring experiences as terrible as, well, I shouldn't say revolution, but
Hmm.
post-revolutionary periods are always ugly and difficult.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I did not believe that we have no alternative.
Okay.
I do not believe there is any way to fix climate change or the threat of nuclear war, just to pick two examples, without completely socializing production and ownership, making production commonly owned. Because I think the profit motive is simply, it's built in. We're not going to be able to solve those problems. Capitalism requires war. It cannot solve climate change. Not to mention, as income disparity increases, the oppression that goes with that, the political oppression, the attacks on speech, the physical assaults on the most oppressed layers, are only going to get worse, until the point where, I don't know if you know this, but there's actually a fascistic bastard as president of the United States right now.
Well, depends on what you mean by fascistic. That term again is so plastic in these days.
I have a fairly precise term, definition of it, which is why I said fascistic, not fascist.
Okay, good.
He's moving toward, in certain ways, moving toward fascism, but not there yet. The movement of stormtroopers is hinted at, but not here yet. We still have time to fight it. And the mass movement of the completely alienated becoming violent and so on, that goes with fascism, is again not here yet.
Okay.
And yet a lot of the pieces of it,
the overtones.
Yeah. And I think that's dangerous.
I think you quoted Trotsky the other day on Twitter about revolution. And you just mentioned...
I do that a lot.
But you recognize the bad part of the revolution. I just wonder if it's possible to have a revolution. I guess the American Revolution worked, but most have had pretty dire consequences. St. Martinique did pretty good.
I mean, so far as I know, society has never yet found a way to advance itself without revolution.
But not like economic revolution or technological revolution.
No, I mean, if you have state power in the hands of a king, capitalism is unable to develop, because the feudal property relations strangle the development of capitalism. So the French Revolution, the American Revolution to a degree, even in a way, the American Civil War, the English Civil War, the spate of revolutions, 1848, paved the way for the growth of capitalism, which is a good thing. Because, I mean, it's certainly better than feudal monarchy.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, people see that the society is growing before the revolution and then grows after the revolution. And so they see the revolution as an unnecessary bump on the road. To me, that's like saying, well, the fetus was growing, and after birth, the kid was, therefore birth is unnecessary. Birth is a violent and difficult process, but it's a necessary one.
You don't think that it's possible for us to go to move forward without violence then?
Whether there's actual violence depends on the circumstances. Usually, looking at, if you study the history of revolutions, the more prepared the revolutionary class is for violence, the less violence there is.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're a gun owner then?
Actually, at this moment, I do own a firearm, but it's a toy. It's a single action, thing. But no, I don't. I don't think the answer is owning guns.
Oh, okay.
At the point at the point of a revolutionary struggle, the military will either come over to the insurgents, or you're dead.
Hmm.
I mean, the key moment in any revolutionary struggle is whether you win over the military.
Hmm.
And the opportunity is always there because the military, I mean, this is part of the same society, right? All the contradictions and difficulties and struggles that are leading the masses toward revolution are also affecting the army. So
Yeah.
how can they be immune? But that doesn't mean they will.
Hmm. It just, in a certain respect, it seems to me that society has advanced so much and is so complex that a revolution, we're not prepared for a revolution. We can't live 5 days without lights. Like we would have to really sacrifice infrastructure in
I don't
order.
see. I really don't see why. I mean, the Bolshevik Revolution in October of 1917 cost not only very few lives, but pretty much didn't disrupt anything. The
Man.
shops were open the next day. The streetcars kept running. Um,
Well,
the
you talk about the Bolshevik Revolution, then I just think of the Gulag, and then what happened to the farm workers, the Cossacks or the Cossacks, and like
do you mean the kulaks?
the kulaks.
Well,
Thank you.
I'll
Fucking
tell you. I mean, there's many people I have a great deal of sympathy with in the aftermath of the Russian Revolution, and particularly
yeah,
the rise of Stalinism.
yeah,
The kulaks aren't one. Fuck the
huh?
kulaks.
Well,
I mean, what
but
they
that's
were
the thing.
doing,
Like, what?
they were hoarding food, creating famine to
Huh?
get a better price.
Huh?
I mean, fuck them. Okay,
Well,
got
okay, but in the power vacuum, how do you prevent a Stalin from coming in and taking advantage of everything?
that's a incredibly complex question. I've dealt with that to some extent in a whole series of blog posts
I
based
was
on
thinking of the Vlad novel if that
uh,
happened.
of of reading Trotsky's Revolution Betrayed, and I sort of went through it in a
Huh?
whole series. Um, but I can give you the soundbite answer, but it's not very satisfying.
Hmm.
It's that
Popcorn.
a working class strong enough to exercise its dictatorship over society will allow no dictatorship over it. In
Hmm.
Russia, they were not strong enough. The working class was not strong enough, particularly after coming out of World War I and the wars of intervention from 1918 to 1922
Hmm.
pretty much shattered them, including the most conscious, self-sacrificing, advanced workers were the ones in the front line,
Hmm.
and they were the ones who were decimated.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a very it was very difficult, and the big thing that happened was the betrayal of the revolutions in Germany, Belgium, England, the English General Strike,
Hmm.
France. That was very reasonable. I mean, in Germany in 1918, the working class actually took power, and their leaders handed it back.
Hmm.
Um,
Oh.
and if that
Are you?
had not happened, we'd be living in a drastically different world right now.
Do you think that it's inevitable that? Do you think tyranny is avoidable? Then I guess that's the question. How do you avoid tyranny?
Tyranny comes up
Tyranny.
when every ruling class wants to run its society as cheaply as possible.
Hmm.
Tyranny is expensive.
Hmm.
When they feel, when the ruling class feels threatened,
Yeah.
like now, I mean, what's happening, what Trump is doing, and the attacks on press freedom, on
Yeah.
Chelsea Manning, Assange, plus the overt repression, the police militarization, that's a sign of weakness.
Hmm.
They're scared because it's much cheaper for them not to do that.
Yeah.
So tyranny is a function of fear of the ruling class. So
Fear from the ruling class.
of them being afraid that
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
they need this in order to secure their power.
Yeah. Do you see like the possibility of a ruling class being eradicated? Isn't there always
Yes,
going to be a ruling class?
No, I don't
Should
believe
that
there
be
is.
automated? Like, should we have a computer do it? Or,
No, I don't think you need a ruling class. I mean, I think we can destroy social classes entirely.
huh.
Um, the first step is to make the majority, that is the working class, the ruling class. But that to me is a temporary situation leading to a classless society. I mean, if everybody owns everything in common, then classes, by the Marxist definition of the term, no longer exist.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you don't have classes, you don't have a ruling class, right?
Yeah.
You have democratic control of the state to the extent you even need a state, which I think would get smaller and smaller.
Has this happened yet somewhere
No,
in the world?
no.
So it's unfalsifiable, like, or like the
Well,
opposite of unfalsifiable. Like, why hasn't it worked yet?
well, the
Or why hasn't it
as
happened?
it's the betrayal of the German Revolution by the Social Democrats,
Mm-hmm.
of the English General Strike by the Labor Party. Um,
I just
it wasn't the Labor.
I'm skeptical that it will never not be betrayed. Like
Oh yeah, that's
you
what.
make the ruling class, the working class, a ruling class. A minority of the working class will then become the ruling class.
Yeah, I
Like it
think
will just.
didn't King Charles II say that about capitalism right after the Restoration? Where has capitalism ever worked? I think he said that. Say that. Says
Okay.
you can't show me a single place where capitalism has worked. He said
Huh.
probably. Um, yeah, I think so. It requires work. It's not an easy thing.
Yeah. Well, and maintenance,
What it
not just.
requires
Yeah.
above all is consciousness, is socialist consciousness spread as widely as possible.
Okay.
I actually mean genuine socialist consciousness, not capitalism that isn't quite as mean.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Can I need to go because I have to go work on dinner. But one more impossible question.
All right.
Can you summarize what you mean by socialist consciousness? What is it about being conscious that would allow this
Okay.
to work?
It is an awareness that our goal is full social, economic, and political equality, and a willingness to work for that goal. Spreading that as widely as possible. And by economic equality, I mean common ownership of production. I mean, an end of political oppression.
Yeah.
And none of this stuff is easy. I'm not saying this is a snap. Okay.
Yeah.
But the more widely, I mean, this isn't ridiculous. Look at the amount of socialist consciousness there was in the United States during the period of the rise of the CIO in the 30s, the late 20s,
Okay.
all the way through the beginning of World War II. How many millions identified themselves as socialists or communists and knew what they were talking about?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, there again, we have the betrayal by the Stalinists. It's a difficult fight. The Trotskyists were fighting it at that time, and just were not strong enough, did not have enough time to build a strong enough movement. But I mean, you can see the seeds of it. I live in a great city. Minneapolis is a wonderful city. Highest percentage of parkland, I believe, in the world by a lot.
Yeah. It's the frozen Portland.
And it got that way because of the Minneapolis General Drivers Strike led by Trotskyists, in which the Citizens Alliance, the anti-union Citizens Alliance was broken. The fascist silver shirts were crushed. And it produced, a really wonderful I'm talking about little hints that this can happen.
Okay.
That this kind of consciousness can spread.
Yeah.
But it requires patiently explaining. It isn't like one of those things where it's all emotion based and you've got to, and all you need to do is rah rah. This requires treating people as intelligent beings.
That's hard for all of
And
us.
yeah,
And acting like intelligent beings.
patiently explaining it can be done,
Yeah.
but it isn't easy.
When you say like collective ownership of labor, you don't mean like that everybody's name is on your book, though, right? I mean, your books are your books. Like that's your labor. If and by extension, an entrepreneur, somebody who owns and runs a small business, it's their name, it's their work, it's their
Okay,
product.
yeah. I'm not talking about a guy who's sitting in his shop making really cool cabinets because that's his passion. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm talking about the Ford plant.
Okay.
I mean, legally, there is no difference under the law at the moment between Walmart
Yeah.
and your house.
Yeah.
Okay? But that's legally. Anyone who doesn't see a difference between those two things is an idiot. Okay? That Walmart and that Ford plant are not only property, they are also how millions of people put food in their mouths.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, socializing those things is, in my opinion, necessary. That doesn't mean I'm some guy who's sitting in a shop with some cool tools making great things. Somebody's going to tell him, no, you can't do that. I mean, that's just stupid. I mean, the idea is to encourage that, to encourage people to follow their passions and create what they want and what moves them. Because that's going to help everybody, right?
Yeah, I mean, unless you're Stalin.
Speaking of Stalin, I should probably let you get back to cooking.
Stephen, thank you so much for your time.
I hope you're going to edit this down to something that doesn't suck.
Oh, if it sucks, it's my fault. And no, it's so great to meet you.
This has been really fun.
Are you coming? Are you doing any tours, or is there a new book coming out by you soon that we can plug now?
Let's see. The next book of mine to come out is The Baron of Magister Valley. That's like a year from now. Okay. I've just released the audiobook of Terrain in Hell and Agyar. Oh. I do the reading on Agyar. A guy named Jeriah Adams read Terrain in Hell. So those are new. Okay.
Are they on Audible? Can I put the links?
Yes. Okay. Can I send you a link?
Yeah, send me the links. We'll put them down in the description. I wish you had an honorific. I keep on wanting to call you professor or doctor or something. But you're just Mister. You're Mr. Bruce.
It's dude.
Hey, dude.
It's hey you.
Hey yo. Get back to writing. Thank you so much for your time, Stephen.
Thank you. It was delightful. And I will see you online. You too.
Yeah. See you online. Ciao.
All right. Bye.